Hey guys, welcome to Masquerade of Motherhood, or as I like to call it, the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place where I am giving you permission to not have it all together. I have some really exciting news. Due to the response from the podcast, I have decided to take the Mom Show on the road. Yep, you heard that right. I am looking to partner with mom groups, small groups, women's events, or Bible studies. They could be in your home or in your church. I want us to join together and remove the masks we wear and claim our identity in Christ. If you're part of a group and you would like for me to speak, follow the link to my website, CourtneyDoyleMinistries.com, and complete the request. Hey guys, welcome back to the Mom Show. Today we are talking about help. My child is an adult. And you may be thinking, why would you need help if your child is an adult? Aren't you now past they're waking you up all night long, you're taxing them around, you're feeding them, 1, 2, 10 meals a day. The laundry is no longer piling up in the laundry room. Isn't it easier when they become an adult? Well, there are some aspects that are, but there are some aspects that are difficult as well. And that's what we wanted to address today. This month, we have been talking all about identity, our kids finding out who they are, whose they are. Then we talked about what do they believe? What happens when their faith questions look different than maybe the way we raise them? And then this week, we're talking about what if, as adult children, their dreams, their desires are different than the box we created and the dream we created. What if they want to be outside of that box? How does that look? How do we handle that as moms? What happens when your child calls and they are struggling with something and a Band-Aid and a kiss from mom is not going to heal that wound? But they need to turn their relationship and their eyes to the Lord. Where is our place as mom in those situations? My guest today is the co-host of Storytellers Live podcast. She has also been the author of the subsequent Bible studies that have come from that community of women who are telling their stories. She has agreed to join us today and tell her story, raising 2 children who are now adults, the things that they have faced, and the lessons that she has learned. She is full of faith, wisdom, and encouragement, and I know that you are going to be blessed by her. So without further ado, here's my guest, Katie. Welcome back, guys, to the podcast. Today, my guest is Katie Dunn. Katie and I met, it's been 2019, 2020. It's
Yes.
been a few years since I met you. And so we want to jump right in. Help, Katie, help. My child is, and I know you have adult children. So you probably have a few fill in the blanks for help my child is over the years of having 2 children. And now they're adults, but let's jump in. I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. And then if you had to fill in that blank for these listeners, what would it be?
Gosh, I know, Courtney, before we actually started recording, I was like, help, my child's an adult now, because you lost all control now. You don't have any control that you thought you had. But just a little bit of background about myself. I have a 22-year-old daughter, Emma, and I have a 24, almost 25-year-old son, Collins, and just have walked through, gosh, so many different layers of struggles and trials, triumphs throughout those years. But the biggest thing that I think that I've learned as a mom, and I honestly say, I don't think I've ever grown as much in my spiritual walk as I have being a mom. I just really think that God has taught me not only so much about myself, where my insecurities lie, where I place my identity, but also in my spiritual journey of just trusting Him and recognizing the fact, and this has especially become true now, but recognizing the fact that my children are not mine. They are His, and He has good plans for them. That my role, and especially as a mom of adults, your role changes. You're no longer in the parent-child relationship as much as you are an adult to adult relationship. And there are so many changes that come with that. I think that I'm more of a coach and a mentor for my kids now versus their parent. And that's really what has shifted for me, especially since my kids graduated from high school.
It is, and it's the relationship shifts and in so many positive ways whenever you
Yeah.
shift over to mentor and coach. And then it is also very difficult because like you said, the control you realize how little control you
Yes.
really have. And it's okay. Now the song Jesus Take the Wheel makes a whole lot of sense.
For sure. And I've recently really latched on to the concept of unsolicited advice is seen as criticism. So just keep your mouth shut, Katie. Just
Oh, that's
listen.
good, Katie. That's good.
And I think that's understanding that my role has changed it's difficult. It's difficult to sit back and watch them make choices. I'm a host of the Storytellers Live podcast, but before I became the host of the podcast, I actually shared my story in 2019. And the title of my story was Releasing Her Children's Choices. And that was when they were in junior high and high school, just
Mm,
allowing them to become the woman and the man that God created them to be instead of trying to control all of their choices. And then also recognizing the fact that I cannot take responsibility when they do good and I can't take responsibility when they do bad either.
mhm.
That I've got to release those choices to God and trust that He's working in it. So I do feel like in those formative years of junior high and high school, God was really working on my heart then to prepare me for honestly where I am now in my relationship with both my kids.
Mhm. Tell me a little bit about each of your kids. Where are we at in
Okay.
adulthood?
Yes, in adulthood. Okay, so my son, who, when I shared my story years ago, a lot of it revolved around him of just, he went off to college and in, gosh, 2017, we ended up having to bring him home that year. Just, it's like I said, I spoke to him about everything except going to class. And he
Mm,
just didn't go to class. And so the
yeah.
grades weren't there. So we brought him home and he came home, everything. Honestly, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh God, you had such a purpose because he came home for a semester, figured out really what he wanted to study in college, and then went back to college again that sophomore year, which was really his freshman year, and did well until 2020 hit.
Mm,
And 2020 just, as we all know, messed up a lot of things for our kids. A lot of things changed for our kids.
yeah.
They had to learn how to navigate the world differently as well.
Mhm.
But that year of 2020 was a big change in that my daughter was graduating from high school. She was a senior of 2020. And then my son was doing well in college, but then the fall of 2020, he ended up dropping out of college. And so I'll get back to Emma in a second, but Collins dropped out that fall of 2020, started just working, and then realized in 2023, no, yeah, 2022, that maybe I should go back to college. Started for a little bit, and then he ended up, and this is just my child who lives for the moment, ended up applying for a job as a ski instructor in Vail, Colorado. So dropped back out of college, and he has been in Vail, Colorado since fall of 2022. So this is his second year as a ski instructor out there. And here's the thing, Courtney, he is doing great. I'm so proud of him. He is a very hard worker. He's 24, and sitting back and watching him make some choices that aren't where I would personally want him to be
Mhm.
is really difficult. Learning how I read a book recently that talked about when your child is an adult, sometimes you just have to be irrationally optimistic
Mm,
about what they're doing to cheer them on and to encourage them.
mm.
And keep your mouth shut. Just be irrationally optimistic about how proud you are of them in the areas that you're proud of them in. And so I'm at that area with Collins. I'm really close to him. I probably talk to him every day, but he's choosing some areas of life that I wouldn't necessarily want him to choose. And as far as I raised him, of course, in the faith, wanting him to trust God with all of his decisions. And another thing God's teaching me is this is his testimony,
Mm.
not mine. And I can't write my son's testimony, right? Only
Yeah,
God can do
yeah.
that. And so I'm really in relationship with him. I am really on my knees, just trusting God that He is working, as His word says, all things for good, but it's going to be done in God's timing and not mine. So that's kind of where
Mhm.
I'm sitting with Collins. Now, with Emma, my daughter who's 22, as I said, she started college off in 2020 and she went off to school and everything was online, of course. And it was a very tough transition for her. being in a dorm room, stuck behind a computer screen for classes. They didn't get together for social events as much. It really started her off on just a very difficult path of transitioning to college. And even to the point where she was home so much that fall of her freshman year,
Yeah.
just depressed, wanting to come home, wanting to go to transfer to a school where she could live at home. She ended up staying, she went to Auburn University in Alabama, ended up staying there the rest of that freshman year. And I watched her sophomore into part of her junior year just struggling to find, quote, her people. I do
Mm,
think that this generation, whether it's, high school or college, I just think they struggle so much with loneliness
mm,
because of social media. And I think because Emma started off in 2020 where things were isolated anyway, it's like she'll say, even to this day, I have friends in this pocket, but she just didn't have her people. And so it was a very difficult, really 2.5 years of college for her. And it really was about a year ago, January of 2023, she had gone back to school and she called me one night and just was in tears and said, Mom, I don't know what's wrong with me, but something is wrong and I can't get out of it. And as a mother, it just, you want to go and fix it
mhm.
immediately. And of course, my knee jerk reaction was, do you want me to drive down there? Can I come? What can I do? And she was like, no, I don't want you to come down here. I just don't know how to get out of it. And anyway, at that moment, Courtney, when I don't know if this was the right thing to do, but I think it was because it turned out good. And I know it sounds like a very trite Christianese thing to say, but I just told Emma, I said, I want you to go all in with God. We were in 21 days of prayer and fasting with our church at that time. And I said, take these 21 days and just go all in with God. And so she started to do that. She was getting up at 6 a.m., going to the prayer services, and then she got COVID. And so
Mm.
then she couldn't go to the prayer services. And she'll say, even to this day, that she was like, really, God? Like, I'm trying to go all in. But what she'll say is that he wanted her to feel alone, to know that she wasn't alone.
Mm.
She began just really reading her Bible, journaling. I recently had the opportunity to do an interview actually with her where she shared some things that happened during that time of just where God met her. And it didn't happen immediately, but over those next 3 or 4 months, she started to find her people. And once she found them, it was crazy because some of the things that she found out was everybody
Mm.
has felt lonely at some time or another. I
Yeah.
really think that's the enemy's tactic, especially with our girls, is to make them just feel so insecure and lonely. But she found her people. And then we had the opportunity as a mother daughter to speak to a graduating class of senior girls that May. So that happened in January, May of last year. We got asked to speak, and so she was forced to write down advice that she would give to girls graduating from high school, going into college. And so I was able to honestly see how God just used those 3 years of loneliness really to draw her into Him. She'll tell you herself, her freshman year, she was trying to fill that spot of loneliness with partying, going out, drinking, and it made her feel more lonely. And of course, not to mention the layers of guilt the next day. You feel guilty. Why did I do that?
Mhm.
But she will say that she had to get to that point of loneliness where she did not know what to do, where God met her there, that really changed her life. And Courtney, it's crazy the growth that I've seen in her spiritually since then over the past 12 months has been astronomical. As far as she'll
Right.
speak to me about things that give me advice on things that I'm like, who are, just
Mm.
because I think she has had to dig so deeply into her relationship with God. And so now she graduated a semester early, graduated this past December, and she is actually with a missionary group called the World Race. It's through
Mm,
something called Adventures in Missions. So she is spending this semester, since she graduated a semester early, she's spending this semester in Africa. And it's funny because all of that loneliness, she went not knowing anybody. And
mm,
I think it prepared her to go and knowing that she didn't know anybody, and if she felt lonely, it's going to be okay because God's met her there before. And
right.
so it's just funny with my children. I just have opposite ends of the spectrum right now in their walks with Christ, in their view of life. And I'm thankful that I at least have one of each, but trying to figure out the parenting through both of those has been, it's been a challenge, but it's also
Sure.
been an exercise of faith for me as well.
Mhm. And it's interesting, I did not realize that we had 2 children the same age because I have one that
Oh,
just turned 25, a boy that turned 25, and I will let you know, if he could get a job in Vail being a ski instructor right now, he would pack it up. I don't know.
I do think if you've read the book Wild at Heart, I do think that is just something within them that they want to have an adventuresome life.
Mhm.
Honestly, when Collins first went out, I thought, oh, this is great. He'll go out there for a year, he'll get it out of the system, he'll come back to the South, he'll get a
Yeah,
job and marry a Southern woman and live near me.
it's a great
Yes,
plan, Katie. I
that's
love
right.
your
That's right.
plan.
It's my pretty picture that I create. It's just unfortunately Collins, my son, tends to throw that picture on the ground quite often. But all that being said, I do think too it's so important, and I feel like God continues to teach this to me over and over again of just understanding we as moms, and I think I feel like men don't do it as much as women do, but we do create these pictures in our head
Mm,
of what we want our children to be like and to look like and to act and to have, all with good intentions. It's coming from a great place, but we try so desperately sometimes to shove them in our picture, and
mhm,
they don't want to be there. And
mhm,
instead of letting them know how much we love them, we end up pushing them further away. And so I've
mhm,
really tried to learn to let Collins live his best life and support that because college isn't for everybody. I
right,
think that back in the day when we were younger, it was like, oh, you have to go to college. And I do believe that culture has shifted in that you don't necessarily have to go to college to have a good contribution to society. And I think that's the main thing
mhm,
that we want our kids to do is to contribute to society. But it's funny living in the suburbs or wherever you're living and everybody it looks like or appears as if everybody is following this plan and yours is
right,
not. You can't help but there's something that happens that you think, what did I do wrong? Did I do
mhm,
something wrong? And I've had to come to the realization that God wired my son and my daughter. I just was a vessel for him to come into the world, but
mm,
he is God's first and foremost. And I've used the analogy before with ministry that if you're in ministry, you're a steward of that ministry. You're not an owner of it. And if you run the ministry like you're an owner of the ministry, it is not going to grow. And I think the same concept relates to our children, especially as they become young adults, is recognizing we don't own them. We are
mm,
stewards of them, trying to guide them the best possible way that we can. But
right,
there's a shift that takes place once they become young adults. And look,
mhm.
letting go can be very difficult to do.
It can be, and it's interesting that I think that you and I could, if we told our personal testimonies of how
Mm,
we came to know the Lord and how our relationship has grown with Him and how our dependence has grown with Him, it's probably not an easy story, right? Things that
yeah.
we've experienced were not great. No testimony is all rainbows and unicorns. And I met Jesus when I was 2, and I've just lived this unscathed life and things have been great. But at some point, I feel like everybody gets to a point in their life where they really know Jesus because they got real desperate for Jesus. And desperation probably resulted from some sort of difficulty. But then we have our children, and it's you just need to know Jesus as well as I know Jesus and not go through any difficulty. That's the age that we set for Jesus, hey, we're going to teach them all about you and we're going to take them to church and they're going to go to summer camp and we're going to do all the things right. But we don't want to watch them experience the trials and the temptations and the difficulties and the leading to their own personal desperation for him. It's, I don't want to be but we're bystanders in all of
Yeah.
it. And it's I didn't sign up
Yeah.
for that part.
Yeah, Courtney, you're exactly right. I think that probably one of my biggest fears for my kids is that they were going to make the stupid choices that I made and not know Jesus. I honestly did not. I grew up in a family that went to church at Easter, and
Mm,
that was pretty much it. My parents would say they were a Christian, but neither one of them I think really knew the Lord, and so in turn I didn't know the Lord. I got married to a man who grew up in a household that went to church every single time the doors were open, and
mhm,
there was some resentment of that for me in my 20s and rebelled through my 20s. I really feel like that I came to know the Lord in my 30s. And if I were defining my decades, I would say my 30s were about a lot of head knowledge, where my 40s turned into, okay, let's apply that knowledge to my heart and to my life.
mhm,
And then now my 50s, I like to say, I really think it's a refinement of my faith, of just seeing God in the struggles. I don't know if any of you have ever read Hind's Feet on High Places, but it is the most incredible book in that how it talks about becoming friends with sorrow and suffering. And that's
mm,
what's going, if you can hold on to their hand and see them as leaders and teachers, how that just changes not only your perspective with God and how you see him, but also embracing sorrow and suffering as guides who can help you get to, quote, the high places where God is, and
mhm,
live in a peaceful spot of life despite the turmoil that might be going on around you. Right now, I'm in the sandwich generation where my mother has Alzheimer's, and I worry about my mom and I worry about my children, and
mhm,
trying to take care of both of them, and what's my role there. And honestly, when some things were happening, there was a moment where Emma was really depressed and lonely and calling me and crying. And Collins was going off on this adventure that I didn't know what kind of influences would be around him. And then my mom was transitioning into memory care. And it was just like, God, where are you? I was
mhm,
just like, I need to feel your presence here. And he led me to First Peter, and I just started reading in verses 6 and 7 there, just stood out to me so much, in that, these struggles are to refine your faith, and your faith is
mhm,
more important than silver or gold. So embrace these moments of struggles and hardships when you don't understand what's going on, because that's a
right,
refinement of your faith in me and your trust in me. And that's going to
right,
be more important. And so I'm really
mhm,
trying to learn how to embrace those things, those struggles and hardships, and allow my children to go through those struggles and hardships as well, because that's the thing. As moms, we want to protect them from all of that. Don't You can make some choices, but just don't make a choice so bad that it's going to affect you. you know?
right, yeah,
But it's like you said, Courtney, looking back on my life, are there things that I would change growing up? I think there probably are, but honestly, all of those things created who I am today. And I think it's given me more of an empathetic heart to people around me that either might not believe in God, or that might be mad at him or angry at him or doubt his goodness. I think
mhm,
I'm able to relate to them more and to explain who the Father is a little bit more clearly because of that.
mhm, yeah, oh, for sure, and so you're saying it was really in your 40s that you felt like you were having this change, and now you're being refined in your 50s yet, and I would agree with you, but then we look at our 20-year-olds and we're like, "You need to have it all together."
I know it's
Like,
funny. Just
I
just
I
the
need
other
you
night.
to be Like,
I
this
know,
is
come
my
on. Like,
back in the
have
box I
put
created
that's
for
right.
you.
Put your hands up in the air and worship Jesus beside me. You know?
Yes.
Yes, I know. And I think I have to remind myself that so often. And I do feel like God really has given me in my spirit a number to hold on to for my son that I'm going to, when he hits that age, that I'm going to look back and be like, oh my gosh, what was I so worried about?
Yeah.
Where were those worries? Now, if he hits that age and he's still not there, I'm still going to trust that God's working. But again, Courtney, God's writing his testimony. And I think
Yeah.
for any mom that's out there struggling, that a wayward child, a child that has walked away like the prodigal son, I think the hardest part for us is to sit back and not
Yeah.
do anything. But the prodigal son, he had his mouth in the pig's trough and he still came home.
Mm,
And just holding on to the fact that God hears my prayers,
mm.
he knows my heart and he hears my prayers and he'll fight for him. So that's really where my heart is right now.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. I've read this book, and a friend and I were talking about it last night, and she sent me the testimony, and it's called Out of a Far Country. It's Christopher Yuan and his mom. I don't know if you've heard of them. His story is quite remarkable. And they are Chinese immigrants. And so I'll let you look it up, or the listeners look it up. But my friend sent me their testimony, and it was the father, the son, and the mom who were all on stage talking about Christopher's testimony and the struggles that they went through and the choices that Christopher made throughout his life and where he is. It was choices of, he was in dental school, he got kicked out of dental school. It was drug usage, drug dealing, homosexuality, prison sentence. When I tell you this man's testimony is, he was brought to the pits of hell and then brought out by his faith in Jesus. But it was the, the thing that gets me about his story is his mother's transformation and his father's transformation and them coming to Christ. And one of the things that he said this morning, and I thought it was so remarkable, was that despite what was happening in his life, once this was after he had been sentenced to prison, when he would call the mom and they would talk, she had been praying fervently for his safety and for him, for the Lord to do whatever he needed to do to bring Christopher to himself. And she used a calculator right by the phone. They had a calculator, and it was one of the old timey ones with the paper tape.
Yeah.
And she decided, instead of focusing on what she could not control, she started focusing on things she could be grateful for at that moment. And she started writing all the things that she was grateful for with and answered prayers with Christopher. And prison, for instance, I'm just grateful that he's safe, that he has shelter, that somebody's feeding him. It's hard to look at a prison sentence and think, gosh, what am I grateful for here? As a mom who has had a child in a prison system, I can understand what she's grateful for. I know where he's sleeping tonight. And she started writing that, and he held it up, and it is longer than she is tall, and it's
Mm.
front and back. And they talk about her fervent prayers and fasting for 8 years. And so it just makes you think about, you may not see the answer today, but that doesn't mean God's not working. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that God's plan isn't perfect. And so it's interesting that you just said that. And with the prodigal son, he's gone. I don't even think scripture actually tells us how
Yeah.
long he was gone. But it's that moment of wait for us as moms that can be so difficult and so trying. And I want to go back to Emma's story for just a minute. I
Mhm.
too had a 2020 graduate. So I completely identify with that freshman year of college. And our daughter had gone 9 hours away and spent most of her fall freshman year at home because everybody kept getting COVID. So they kept kicking them out of the dorms.
Yeah.
And she did have a sister that was there. But at that time, we were so uncertain about what COVID was, and that her sister has asthma. And so it was like, you really cannot be around your sister if you're going to get COVID. Because, of course, at that time, everybody's, oh, asthmatics, people with underlying conditions, it could be even more dangerous than it was for everybody else. Anyway, long story short, your story of Emma struggling like to find her people,
Mhm.
it was because there were no people.
Yeah.
It was just a computer. And so now getting back involved and things like that. But when Emma called you and she said, I can't get out of this. Were you aware up to that point, Katie, that she was this lonely and she was this depressed? Were there any signs leading up to this,
Yeah.
or was it just this random phone call and the rug was pulled out from under you as well?
Yeah, with Emma, it was almost a roller coaster her entire college. It would be like she'd have some highs and then she'd have those lows. And then she'd get a high again, then she'd go lows. And I do think her coming home at Christmas and then going back, and at that time, at the college she was at, I'm not sure how it is for most colleges, but they had to decide who they were living with the next year, September of
It's
their freshman.
ridiculous.
Yeah, they just started
Yes.
school and they have to decide who
Yes.
they're living with and where they're living their sophomore year, and then the same for their junior year. And
Yes.
for her junior year, she was supposed to live with some girls, and then that fell through. And then everybody had already gotten their roommates. And so there was one place where she could live, which was a carriage house attached to a house, but she was going to be by herself.
Mm.
And hindsight, I don't know if that was the best thing for her, because she went back, I think, to that carriage house. And while the girls in the house were so friendly and they would say, Emma, this is your house too, she just felt funny going into the house because she felt like that was their house. And so she just would stay in her little carriage room all the time. And I encouraged her, you've got to step out of your comfort zone and you've got to reach out to them. And that was really what was hard, is trying to get her to do that. And it's funny, Courtney, one thing that I saw with Emma, her personality changed so much from
Mm.
high school to college. High school, she was fear of missing out. She had to be involved in everything. She was, quite honestly, a little bit too loud. She was crazy, all that. And she just in college turned into, I don't want to go out with anybody. I'm just going to stay here. I'm not confident. And
Mm.
it was really hard as a mom to watch that shift. My sister and I would talk about it a lot. My sister has a daughter that is just a year ahead of Emma, and they're really close friends as cousins. She was at another college, and Emma would call her a lot to try to talk through some things. My sister was the one that said to me, you don't think any Emma would ever do anything, just because she was in
Mm.
that season of just loneliness. And so there was a lot of open dialogue between Emma and I about that. And really, honestly, Courtney, I tried not to be so much of, oh, just trust God's going to work things out, and push
Mm.
that a lot. But she didn't want to hear that at times, because I think honestly it was
Yeah.
making her mad at God. Like, what, where are these? Because I was getting mad at it. I was like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, just bring her a friend.
Yeah.
um, but in hindsight's always 2020. Like, looking back, he was working so much in the details of her life into who she is today as a 22-year-old. Again, she's so much more mature because of what she walked through. When you're at the point and your daughter's calling you and she's just, I don't know what to do. Of course, my heart was broken and I felt very helpless as a mom because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't do anything. But
Mhm.
I could pray. And I think that really is where our faith comes in to play, of putting our faith into action, of, do we really believe what we say we believe? Do we really
Mm.
believe that the Holy Spirit is with her? She's not alone. The Holy Spirit is with her, and that's the power that can raise the dead. So of course he can get her out of this season of loneliness and depression. And God, in the name of Jesus, you are going to use this loneliness and depression to bring glory back to God. And just really claiming those scriptures over her is where I landed, because that was the only thing I could do. And I feel like so often as moms, we think that's a passive action, that just, oh, I'm just going to pray. And it's really the most powerful thing that we can do for our kids if we really believe what we say we believe. And that's where I've always said with my kids when I'm praying for them, God, I cannot go with them, but you can. I can't go to Colorado. I can't go on that mountain with him. I can't go to those bars with him, but you can
Mhm.
convict him.
Mhm.
You can speak to his heart. I can't. And just really resting in those facts.
Yeah, I've had some episodes with our oldest son where I did not know where he was. I did not know what was happening. And getting to that point of realizing, okay, God, I can't be there, but you are there. And having to remind myself, having to tell myself that he may be hidden from me, but he's not hidden from you. Your daughter had very clear expectations, I'm sure, of what college was going to look like. And
Oh,
now
right.
it's blown out of the water, number one, by
Yeah.
a pandemic and just adding on to the other things that are different
Yeah.
about who we are and who we become
Yeah.
in our early 20s.
Yeah, and I think too that that is one thing that my husband and I would tell her is, "Oh, this is going to be the best 4 years of your life." And I think that because it wasn't,
Yeah.
she thought that was her. What's wrong with me? And going back to you saying just about people, just I think especially this generation, they get caught up so much in their life that they aren't necessarily leaving people out on purpose. They're
Mhm.
just thinking about themselves. And that was
Right.
one conversation that I tried to have with Emma over and over again. It's just, Emma, they are not doing this to hurt you on purpose. It's just an
Right.
oversight. It's not, don't take that as that they hate you or they don't want you to be around or whatever. But I will tell you, Courtney, like it was over and over again of just things that I'm just like, what in the world is this generation doing? Like they just don't think beyond themselves that
Well,
often.
but the world tells us not to, Katie. It's all about
Yeah.
you. How do you
Yeah.
feel? What do you want?
Yeah.
Do what makes you happy. This is your world. You create your own happy. This is what
Yeah.
is pouring into them non-stop
Yeah.
all day long. You
And
do
and I
you.
yes. And I think that was one thing that I really tried to emphasize to Emma was I was like, just remember this feeling so that if you see somebody else that's ever feeling left out, that you're
Right.
able to reach out to them. And I have seen her do that as well. But then also as a mom, it's taught me we have to have grace to those
Mhm.
girls or boys that hurt our children and forgiveness towards them. Because I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of moms who they hold on to anger and resentment and bitterness and unforgiveness longer than the child does and not being able to let go and how important that is for us as parents to model that.
Oh, absolutely. And it is hard, especially if your child's been hurt to
Oh, yeah.
forgive
Yeah.
the
Mama
perpetrator.
bear is Mama bear is strong.
It is so strong. I was in Bible study a couple weeks ago, and there's a sweet mama and her kiddos are younger, and she got to school to pick her son up, and when she looked over, they were all the kids are outside and they're playing, and there was this boy that had him like pinned up against a wall, and she was like, "I got out of that car and I rushed over there and I was like, 'Are you okay?' And he was laughing and, 'Yeah, I'm fine, mom.' And, 'Why were you pinned against the wall? What does he do?' 'I will take a kid out.'" And she said, and he's at a Christian-based school, and so we were
Oh.
just laughing. She was like, "Y'all, it was like I just lost my Jesus. I was literally gonna attack a seven-year-old. Like, who even am I?" And we were like, "You're a mom. It's
Yeah,
okay.
that's
We
right.
have all
That's
been
right.
there, like, what seven-year-old or what 20-year-old girl do I need to
Yes.
confront?"
I know.
It's just who we are, right? We just wanna
Yeah,
step in, we want to help, and with the best of intentions, we don't
that's
really wanna
right.
hurt a seven-year-old, but God made us this way, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like,
Yeah.
"You gave me this feistiness." You
Absolutely.
one of the things that you said about whenever I said, "What are some tools that you used while Emma was facing this depression?" I think that from what I've heard you say, you were available, of course, for
Mm,
her. You asked hard questions. You said y'all were very
yeah.
open about, is
Yeah.
Emma in a situation where she was potentially considering harming
Yeah.
herself, and what steps do we need to take to prevent that or to get her home? But you also said there is such an importance of speaking life-giving words to
Uh,
your children. And I want to go back to Collins for a second, because what
yeah.
you said is you're really trying to be excited and encouraging for Collins, even though he's outside of your box, which, Katie, it's a great box. I'm all about come home, get married, have grandchildren.
That's right. That's right.
I'm gonna get
I'll be
everybody
your
matching
babysitter.
outfits, right? Everybody will be monogrammed. It's a Southern
Yes.
thing, and it is a beautiful picture. And but you're saying there's importance to life-giving words, and
Mhm.
with Collins, there's importance to you encouraging him, though it is unexpected and it looks different. Let's talk a little bit about that for the mom that's listening. Like, how do we do that? What does that look
Yeah.
like?
How are we irrationally optimistic when I particular am very rational? What I'm trying to do with him a little bit more is just trying to understand his mindset and where he's coming from, and not trying to pigeon him into this hole of, this is the direction I saw your life going. I want you to make that detour back into that direction. I have come to with open hands of, this is his life. It's not my life to live. And where has God gifted him? Find, because all of our children are gifted in so many different special ways, and really trying to parent the child that I have, not to parent the child that I thought I would have. But parent the child God has given me, not the child that I thought that I would have. And that's not saying a bad thing. It's just saying Collins is not, he does not like a classroom setting. He
Mm-hmm.
never really has. I can look back on kindergarten and I remember them saying he's more of a hands-on learner. And that's a gift from God. Even as a ski instructor, just recognizing the fact, you know what? It's not easy to be a ski instructor. You have to have a lot of patience
I
and
mean,
be able to, yeah,
especially
patience
if
and
you've
being
had
able to.
the Doyle girls go skiing, because we're down more than we're up. I'm not going to lie.
He's so patient and just obviously very talented in his ability to communicate with people. So
Mhm.
really encouraging him in that area. There's been several times where people have hired him, just they have gotten him just randomly as a private instructor, and then they'll hire him for 3 or 4 days after that. And so obviously I tell him all the time, gosh, you must be really good or teaching them really well. He had a pastor from one of the largest churches in South Africa. He had a pastor and his whole family out there. Now, if this isn't a God thing, I don't know what is, but the pastor was out there, hired him for the whole week, asked him to go to dinner with them.
Mhm.
So it's like things like that I'm holding on to, that God's working, but just
Yeah.
not in the way maybe I would want it to happen. Collins has said he's considering going to back to school, but in Colorado, and just trying to encourage that versus saying, oh, you could easily go to Auburn. There's a condo down there that we could put you at, like, just being supportive, just entering his world and his culture and meeting him there instead of expecting him to meet me in mine. I think that
Mm-hmm.
is one of the things that I'm really trying to embrace right now. Just like, you know what? Experience is going to be his teacher. He is
Mm-hmm.
going to have to be taught by experience, not by us. We cannot stop that. And the importance of life giving words, but also, Courtney, I think another thing that has just helped me as a mom is surrounding myself with women that I trust, that
Mm-hmm.
will lock arms with me. And I know that they're praying for my children as well. I feel so blessed that I probably have 10 women that I know of that I could immediately put out a SOS prayer request, and I know that they're going to be on
Yeah.
their knees for him.
Mm.
And I know that God hears all that. He
Yeah.
honors all of that, and just giving me a peace in that as well.
Do you ever project out and think to yourself, what if it never looks the way you thought it was going to look? And so you have this, sometimes that's how I've had to deal with some of our more trying situations with our oldest son, living a life instead of looking at it like, what if, looking at it from an even if
Yes.
standpoint. You know what? Even if Collins never goes back to
Hmm.
school, if he spends
Hmm.
the rest of his life on that mountain
Yeah.
in Vale, what does that look like? And even if he does that, God is still good. God is still
Yeah.
present. The most important piece of this for his life is for him to know the Lord, be surrendered to
That's
the
right.
Lord,
That's
and what he's doing on this earth. Like you just said, he spent this week with a pastor. It's God's going to send people that
yeah.
are going to minister to him. And obviously, he is ministering to people through his patience, his kindness, his ability to teach.
Oh yeah.
And we have no idea. There was a counselor that I had on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she had talked about how we go very quickly into ants and we let ants invade our thoughts, and it's automatic negative thoughts and stories. And so I think when we have created our expectations and our stories one way and they don't look that way, we let those ants invade our thoughts, and it's automatically, it's negative that you didn't go to college. And I'm speaking like of my number
Yeah.
two kiddo, right? Like, it's a negative thing that you didn't finish. And maybe it's not, because what you just said, Collins never really was a sit in the
Right.
classroom kind of
That's
kid.
right.
And so it is hard to embrace the different paths that our kids take,
Yeah.
and when they don't look the way that we thought. And it's hard for us not to, we have to combat those ants, those negative
Oh,
thoughts.
I think that is why God tells us in his word, take every thought captive to Christ. And why I
Right.
think it's why it's so important for us to fill our minds with scripture so that when those thoughts come into our head, we're able to fight those thoughts with God's
Mhm.
word of just taking every thought captive to Christ. There's now scientific evidence that proves that we can actually rewire our brains and how we think
Yes.
and where those
Mhm.
thoughts go. And the more we rewire that brain, that pathway, it becomes more easy to go into, oh, that's a lie from Satan. And I'm going to capture that and I'm not going to focus on it. I love the idea of ants because how quickly those ants can come in. And all of a sudden you're awake at 2 a.m. at night crying in your bed over something that's never happened because you're,
Guilty.
that's right. Because you're thinking, oh my gosh, if he continues down this path, where's he going to be? He's going to be here. And it's, wait a minute, that hasn't happened yet. And
Mhm.
just taking those thoughts captive. Look, you hit the nail on the head, Courtney, with my biggest prayer is for my children to know the Lord. I
Mhm.
think that's my biggest prayer because for so long I did not know the Lord. And I know just the chaos that it brings in your world when you're not walking with the Lord and you don't know him and know him for who he truly is, because he is a father who
Yeah.
is gentle and kind and faithful and loving and forgiving, all of those things. He's not a dictator. He doesn't expect you to follow a set of rules. He just wants you to accept him. And so just wanting my kids to understand who he is. I really am over the fact of if he ends up on that mountain and he's 65 years old, just
I
wrinkled up coming
mean,
down that mountain, then it's okay. Look, but if that's his mission field, gosh, that would be my prayer is
mhm.
just that he would fall in love with Jesus, honestly. And I think where I've come to in that, and I'm still probably trying to grasp it fully, is knowing that there's a possibility I might not see that in my lifetime. I don't know. I don't know what God's timetable is, but I'm
Yeah.
trusting that his timing is perfect and that he hears my prayers and that he can work all things for good. And he can
Mhm.
take whatever either one of my kids is walking through and use it for their good and for his
Mhm.
glory. And that's where I have to open up my hands. I have to put my faith into action and
Mhm.
I have to trust the process
Yeah.
of leaning into him and knowing that he's working.
And you see the fruit of that through what Emma went through with the loneliness and
Oh,
the
yeah.
depression. And like you said, now she's in South Africa, and he needed her to be
Yeah.
lonely to
To go.
refocus
Yeah.
and to
Mhm.
go and to equip her for what she's doing right now. And I love that he does that for us, that we pray, we go through situations, and then we don't like them, and then when you get on the other side, that hindsight view of it, and you're like, "Okay, I didn't like that, but I wouldn't change it because it was necessary for where I am or where
That's right.
they are today." And so it is a beautiful picture. And what you just said about them knowing God as their mother or their father, we're just speaking to moms here. You're that vessel for the forgiveness, for the grace, for the kindness, for the love. And how many times do you think God sits up there and says, "Man, this is, I didn't want you to do that. That's not the choice that I would have wanted for you, but here you go, making a choice that's contrary to what I have planned for you." We're all doing that, right? We are all
Yeah.
Collins on the mountain
Yep.
in our own veil, making decisions that God probably is not, that's not where I wanted you, but here you are, but I'm still
Yes.
going to love you, accept you,
Yeah.
show you
Yeah.
kindness and grace until you come back around. And so I think it's a great analogy for what we can be as moms when our children are outside of the box that we created, or the unexpected happens, like with Emma, and this loneliness and this depression, and just being available for them despite where they are. and
Yeah.
loving them despite how we feel about the situation. It's such great
Mhm.
advice, and
Mhm.
you're setting an example, right?
I think also
For
you
who God
saying that,
is.
yeah, yeah. And just recently, I was in a Bible study where you hear 1 Corinthians 13 a lot of times at weddings. Love is patient, love is kind, all of that. But instead of saying the word love, say a parent's love is patient.
Mhm.
A parent's love is kind, because it's agape love. It's that love that the Father has for us. And it's the love that He wants us to extend to everyone, but especially to our children. And so
Mhm.
I encourage those of you, get out that Bible and look at chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians, and just put a parent's love is, and just think about your children. How are you being patient and kind, and that you're not proud and boastful? Because as parents, we're either really proud of our child, or sometimes we're ashamed. We live on
Right.
those two spectrums,
Mhm.
when that's not the love that God calls us to be as a parent.
I call it walking on the tightrope between pride it's if you're super proud, then you're boastful and
Yes.
you're arrogant, and that's with their successes. But then if you fall off the tightrope into their failures, then now you're hiding and you're masking and you're
Yeah.
ashamed and you're guilty. And it's like, how do we balance this tightrope between this prideful attitude and this failure mentality? We're just supposed to balance in the middle and not let our identities get lost in the failures and the successes of our children. Either one, we can get
That's right.
our own identities wrapped up into that, who we are as a mom, who we are as a person, what could I have done different? It's not about you. It's not
Yeah.
about you. It's about Jesus. How do we look up to Jesus and say, hey, you loved them first, you loved them most. And now the biggest test of my faith is truly trusting you with their future and holding on to the truth of what
Yeah.
your word says. So, speaking of his word, when I close out this podcast with each episode, I ask, what can we join you in praying for right now? And do you have a verse that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah. Of course, I think my prayer right now is for me to continue opening my hands with my children and letting go of control, praying for both of them to see the Father as who they are, as who He is, and who He created them to be. And my verse, honestly, and I think it's because my word for this year with God is sovereign. I try to pick a word once a year to hold on to, is
Yeah.
just trusting in His sovereignty, and trusting that He's working in those struggles that I might be walking through. And my verse does go to that First Peter chapter 1 verses 6
Hmm.
and 7, where it does just talk about, just don't try to push those struggles away. Embrace the struggles, because they are a refinement of your faith,
Mm.
which is just more precious than silver or gold. And so understanding the role that suffering, sorrow, struggles, just understanding the roles that all three of those play in our faith journey, and really keeping my eyes focused on eternity. I do
Hmm.
think that it's just so easy to focus on what's going on in the moment, but really focusing on eternity, and knowing, just like how God did for the Israelites in the wilderness, that He's going to give me the manna I need for today, and to not expect Him to give me enough faith for my imagination that happens at 2 a.m. in the morning. He's not going to give me the faith for that, because that hasn't happened. He'll give me enough faith that I need for today, and really just
Mm.
holding on to that, and knowing that He's faithful to do that as well. Holding on to
Mhm.
that is really where I am.
That's really good. I don't need the faith for my imagination at 2
Yeah.
a.m.
He's going to give you faith for your reality, not your imagination. A friend of mine told me that
That's
years ago, and I
that's
was
a
like,
word.
oh, got to remember that.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Katie, it's been such a joy to have you. Thank you for sharing
Thank you.
what it's like to have
Absolutely.
adult children.
I know it's tough, but hang in there.
Yeah, it is, but it's a beautiful transition. And I
It
mean, I'm
is.
in the thick of it with you. I am. And I appreciate your willingness, and we will be joining you in prayer for those things. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Remember to check the show notes for links to the books and all of the resources mentioned in today's episode. If you want to print, screenshot, or share this week's verse, head to the show notes where you're going to find a link to my website and a graphic for you to use. Thanks so much for listening to Masquerade of Motherhood with Courtney Doyle. We want to be sure this blesses you and other mothers. And in order to do this, first, you must subscribe. This way you won't ever miss an episode. Also, if you'll rate and review this podcast on iTunes or wherever you're listening, this will increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.